Karen lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where every lawn looked almost the same. The grass was trimmed neatly, the houses stood in rows with matching roofs, and the streets always looked clean. To many people, it felt like a peaceful place to raise a family. But to Karen, it was more than that. She thought of herself as the one who kept the neighborhood in order. She was not officially part of any committee, yet she acted as though she had the authority of a whole homeowners association. If someone left their trash bin outside too long, Karen noticed. If someone painted their fence a different shade than the rest, Karen made sure everyone heard about it. She believed she was protecting the image of the community. Some neighbors smiled at her politely but rolled their eyes when she turned away. Others simply avoided her. Still, Karen never thought she was doing anything wrong. She felt proud of being the one who cared the most. One warm afternoon, Karen was out walking her small dog. The sun was bright, and the street was quiet except for the sound of birds. As she passed by the house across the street, she slowed down. The house belonged to a man named Daniel, who had moved in recently with his wife, Maria. They were polite people who did not make much noise. Most of the time, Maria could be seen watering the plants or waving at neighbors with a smile. Daniel usually kept busy with his job, and the couple seemed happy together. But to Karen, something about them never seemed right. She could not explain why, but she felt Maria did not fit the picture of how the neighborhood should look. She told herself it was because Maria often wore her hair tied back in a simple way or because she drove a truck instead of a smaller car. In truth, it was just Karen's habit of looking for problems where none existed. That afternoon, as Karen stood across the street, she noticed Daniel's truck parked in the driveway. It was pulled up just a little close to the sidewalk. The tires rested inches from the line. Next to the door, a pair of clean shoes had been left on the porch. Through the window, she thought she saw the curtain slightly open, as if someone had peeked out earlier. None of these things were unusual, but in Karen's mind, they became a reason for concern. She held her dog's leash tightly and whispered to herself, "This looks wrong. It looks careless. People like that lower the standard of our neighborhood." The longer she stared, the more convinced she became that something had to be done. A thought formed quickly in her mind. She pulled her phone from her pocket and stared at the screen. Calling Daniel directly was not an option. Knocking on the door would not work either. She wanted to do something bigger, something that would show everyone that she was watching out for them. She pressed the numbers and waited. The line connected, and a calm voice answered, 911, "What is your emergency?" Karen lowered her voice as though she was about to share a serious secret. "Yes, I'd like to report a situation," she said. The dispatcher asked, "What is the situation, ma'am?" Karen glanced once more at the house across the street. She spoke slowly, making her words sound important. "There's a woman staying in one of the houses here. I don't think she belongs. I believe she might be trespassing. You should check it immediately." The dispatcher, trained to stay calm, asked for details. Karen gave the street address clearly. Then, without being asked, she added more. "This neighborhood is very quiet, very safe. We cannot have strangers staying here. You should send someone right away before there's trouble." When the call ended, Karen slipped her phone back into her pocket with a small smile of satisfaction. She walked her dog further down the street, imagining how the neighbors would thank her later. In her mind, she saw officers arriving, asking questions, and removing the so-called stranger from the house. She pictured herself explaining how she had noticed the signs that others ignored. She thought about how people would admire her for her quick action. What Karen did not know was that the woman she had just reported was not a stranger at all. Maria was Daniel's wife, and she had every right to be in the house. More importantly, Maria was not only a resident of the neighborhood but also the county sheriff. When the call came in, it was routed through the system and reached the sheriff's office. Maria was finishing some paperwork when she noticed the address. She looked at the screen, blinked once, and read it again. It was her own home. At first, she thought it must be a mistake. But as she listened to the details, she realized what was happening. Someone in the neighborhood had decided to report her as an intruder. She put down her pen, straightened her uniform, and prepared to respond. Karen, still walking her dog with a sense of pride, had no idea that the very person she wanted gone was now on the way to her doorstep. Maria sat in her office at the sheriff's station, a small stack of papers in front of her. She had been working since early morning, filing reports and reviewing patrol schedules. Her day had been calm until she saw the call come through. The dispatcher handed her the details, and she immediately noticed the address. It was her own home. Her eyebrows rose slightly as she read the note attached to the call. The complaint said that a woman was trespassing in the neighborhood. Maria took a deep breath and leaned back in her chair. She was used to unusual calls, but this one felt personal. She tapped the paper with her pen, thinking carefully. The dispatcher asked if she wanted to assign another deputy to the case. Maria shook her head. "No, I'll take this one myself," she said with a calm voice. She stood up, put on her uniform jacket, and adjusted the badge pinned neatly on the front. There was no anger in her movements, only quiet determination. Maria drove back toward her neighborhood in her official vehicle. As she turned into the familiar street, she noticed how still everything looked. Children were playing in a yard 2 houses down, their laughter filling the air. A man was washing his car across the road. Everyone seemed relaxed, unaware of the little storm about to unfold. Meanwhile, Karen had just returned from her short walk with her dog. She spotted the sheriff's vehicle approaching, and her heart lifted. She thought her report had been taken very seriously. In her mind, she was about to be proven right in front of the whole neighborhood. She hurried to her front yard, holding the dog's leash tightly, and waited. The car stopped near Daniel's driveway. Maria stepped out slowly, her presence calm but strong. Her uniform carried authority, and her steady gaze showed confidence. Some neighbors who noticed her arrival began peeking out from behind curtains, curious to see what was going on. Karen waved from across the street and called out, "Officer, over here. I'm the one who called." Maria turned her head and looked at her, but her expression didn't change. She walked toward Karen with steady steps. When she reached her, she asked politely, "Are you the one who made the report?" Karen straightened her shoulders proudly. "Yes, that was me. I saw something unusual. I think there's a woman staying in that house, and I don't believe she belongs. I thought it was my duty to inform the authorities." Maria listened carefully, her face unreadable. "And what exactly made you think she doesn't belong?" she asked in a calm tone. Karen gestured toward the house with a wave of her hand. "Look at it. The truck is too close to the sidewalk. The porch looks messy. I don't recognize the woman who goes in and out of that house. For all we know, she could be trouble." For a moment, Maria stood quietly. She didn't rush to answer. She simply studied Karen, who looked back at her with a mix of pride and impatience. Then, with deliberate slowness, Maria said, "I see. Thank you for your concern." Karen smiled, feeling satisfied. She expected Maria to march up to the door and drag the so-called stranger out. Instead, Maria walked calmly toward the house. The neighbors leaned closer to their windows, their curiosity growing stronger. Maria reached the front steps, took the key from her pocket, and unlocked the door. She stepped inside, then turned around and faced Karen from the doorway. Her voice was steady, not loud, but strong enough for everyone nearby to hear. "There is no trespasser here," she said clearly. "This is my home. I live here with my husband, Daniel. I am Sheriff Maria, and I belong here as much as anyone else." The words struck Karen like a heavy stone. Her smile froze, and her eyes widened in shock. She opened her mouth but no words came out. The neighbors who had been watching whispered among themselves. Some covered their mouths to hide their surprise, while others shook their heads. Maria didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply spoke the truth with calm authority. "I answered this call because someone claimed I didn't belong. But I want everyone here to understand something. No one should ever judge another neighbor without facts. No one should assume who belongs and who doesn't based on appearance or guesses." Her words hung in the warm air, carried across the quiet street. Karen finally managed to speak, but her voice was weaker than before. I didn't know. I was only trying to protect the neighborhood." Maria nodded slightly, her expression softening just a little. "Protecting the neighborhood is important, but there's a difference between protecting and judging. Next time, ask questions before making calls like this." The dog at Karen's feet whined softly, tugging at the leash. Karen looked down, unable to meet Maria's eyes. The neighbors who had been watching now stepped back from their windows. Some felt embarrassed for Karen. Others felt proud of Maria's calm and steady way of handling the situation. Maria closed her door gently and returned to her vehicle. Before driving away, she glanced once more at Karen, who still stood frozen on her lawn. The sheriff's calm authority had spoken louder than anger ever could. That evening, word of what happened spread quickly through the neighborhood. Everyone now knew the truth. The woman Karen had tried to remove was not only a rightful resident but also the sheriff who kept the entire county safe. And for Karen, the realization was only beginning to sink in. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing with whispers. People who had seen the sheriff's calm response the day before were now eager to share the story. At the corner cafe, neighbors spoke in low voices over coffee. At the park, parents whispered while watching their children play. Even the mail carrier heard pieces of the tale while making rounds. "Did you hear what happened at Daniel and Maria's place?" one man asked. "Yes, I heard. She's the sheriff," another replied with wide eyes. "Imagine calling the police on the sheriff herself," a woman added, shaking her head. The story spread faster than anyone expected. Most neighbors felt impressed by Maria's quiet strength. They admired how she had handled the situation without anger. But at the same time, they couldn't help but chuckle at the mistake Karen had made. Karen, however, was not laughing. She sat by her window that morning, curtains half drawn, watching the street nervously. She could sense that people were looking at her differently now. Some avoided eye contact. Others gave her tight smiles that didn't reach their eyes. She felt the weight of their judgment, though no one said anything directly to her. Inside, Karen replayed the scene from the previous day over and over. She thought about the sheriff's calm voice, the neighbors peeking from their windows, and her own stunned silence. The memory made her chest tighten. For the first time in a long while, Karen doubted herself. Meanwhile, Maria went about her day as usual. She wasn't one to dwell on drama. After finishing her shift at the station, she stopped by a grocery store on her way home. She walked down the aisles with confidence, greeting people she knew. Some had already heard about the incident and greeted her with smiles. A few even said, "Good job yesterday, Sheriff." Maria accepted their words politely, but she didn't make a big deal of it. For her, it had only been another moment of doing her job calmly, clearly, and fairly. Later that evening, Daniel and Maria sat on their porch together. Daniel leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "that call could have been worse. If someone else had answered, it might have turned into confusion. But you handled it perfectly." Maria smiled softly. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing what's right without anger. People often assume things. I just wanted the neighborhood to learn not to jump to conclusions. Daniel nodded. Well, I think they learned. Karen definitely learned. They both chuckled quietly, though Maria's tone carried more patience than amusement. She was not interested in embarrassing Karen. She simply hoped the woman would think twice before judging others so quickly. Across the street, Karen stood at her own window, watching them. She could see the couple sitting calmly on their porch, enjoying the evening. For a moment, Karen felt a pang of envy. They looked so relaxed, so at peace, while she was restless inside. Her dog barked softly at her feet, breaking her thoughts. She sighed and whispered, "Maybe I made a mistake." Saying the words out loud felt heavy, but also honest. The next day, when Karen walked her dog, she noticed two neighbors chatting near their mailboxes. As soon as they saw her, they grew quiet. One of them gave a polite nod, but the other simply turned away. Karen felt her cheeks grow warm. It was clear they were still thinking about what she had done. She returned home quickly, feeling isolated. For the first time, her sense of authority over the neighborhood seemed shaky. Later that week, the homeowners association had a small meeting at the community hall. It wasn't unusual, they met every month to discuss small issues like gardening rules and street repairs. But this time, the room felt different. As Karen walked in, she sensed a shift in the air. People glanced at her but didn't greet her warmly. Maria attended the meeting as well, not in her uniform but in casual clothes. She sat quietly with Daniel, listening as the group discussed usual matters. At one point, a neighbor raised his hand and said, "Before we move on, I think it's important we remind ourselves about fairness. We all live here together. Let's not assume who belongs and who doesn't." Everyone nodded, and the words clearly pointed back to the recent event. Karen lowered her head, wishing she could vanish from the room. Maria didn't speak up during the meeting. She didn't need to. The message had already been made clear. When the meeting ended, some neighbors came up to Maria to thank her for her service as sheriff. Others chatted with Daniel about his work. Karen walked out quietly, her shoulders slouched, her dog tugging gently at the leash. The days that followed were quiet for the most part, but inside Karen, a storm was still brewing. She had built her identity around being the protector of the neighborhood, the one who kept order. But now her neighbors saw her differently. Instead of viewing her as a watchful guardian, they saw her as someone who had judged unfairly and been humbled in front of everyone. For the first time in years, Karen wondered if she had been wrong all along. And though she tried to push the thought away, she knew deep down that the sheriff's calm words had planted a seed of change inside her. The sun rose gently over the neighborhood, painting the roofs in soft gold. Birds chirped in the trees, and sprinklers clicked across neat lawns. It looked like any other peaceful morning, yet for Karen, nothing felt the same. She sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at the steam curling upward. For years, she had enjoyed the quiet confidence of believing she was the watchful eye of the street. Now, after the incident with Maria, that confidence felt cracked. When she walked her dog that morning, she noticed neighbors again. Some smiled politely, but their eyes held curiosity. Others avoided her completely, pretending to be busy with their gardens or mail. The whispers hadn't gone away. Karen tugged her dog's leash and muttered, "They'll forget soon." But even she didn't believe her own words. Across the street, Maria was watering her flowers. She wore simple jeans and a light shirt, her hair tied back neatly. Daniel stood beside her, carrying a bag of soil. They looked comfortable and content. When Maria saw Karen, she lifted her hand in a small wave. Karen froze for a moment, then gave a quick nod before hurrying along. Something about Maria's calm smile made her chest tighten. It wasn't mockery. It was kindness. And that kindness felt heavier than judgment. That evening, the homeowners association decided to host a small community picnic at the park. It was meant to bring everyone together and ease tension after recent gossip. Families arrived with picnic baskets, blankets, and coolers. Children ran across the grass while parents set up folding chairs. Maria and Daniel came as well, carrying a tray of homemade food. Neighbors greeted them warmly. "Sheriff, thank you for being here," one woman said. "It means a lot to know we have someone like you living here." Maria smiled softly. "I'm just another neighbor. Today, I'm here to enjoy the picnic like everyone else." Karen stood on the edge of the crowd, holding her dog's leash and a small basket. She felt uneasy. In the past, she might have taken charge of an event like this, making sure everyone followed the rules. But now, she wasn't sure if anyone wanted her guidance. As she looked around, she noticed people laughing, chatting, and enjoying themselves. No one seemed to need her watchful eye. For the first time, Karen felt like an outsider in her own community. When she spotted Maria across the park, surrounded by smiling neighbors, she hesitated. Part of her wanted to walk away, but another part whispered that she should face her mistake. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Maria noticed her approach and greeted her with the same calm smile as before. "Good evening, Karen." Karen swallowed hard. "Sheriff. I mean, Maria." "I wanted to," she paused, her words stuck in her throat. The crowd around them seemed quieter, though no one was truly listening. It was only her own nervousness making the air feel heavy. Maria waited patiently, her eyes steady but kind. Finally, Karen spoke. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called the police like that. I judged you without knowing the truth. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, but I see now I was only causing harm." The words came out clumsy, but they were honest. Maria's expression softened. She placed a gentle hand on Karen's arm and said, "Thank you for saying that. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong. What matters now is what we do next." Karen blinked, surprised by the lack of anger in Maria's voice. She had expected sharp words or cold dismissal. Instead, she found understanding. Daniel, standing beside Maria, added kindly, "We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." For the first time in days, Karen felt the tension in her shoulders ease. She nodded slowly. "I'll try to do better. I don't want to be the reason people feel unwelcome here." Maria gave her a small smile. "That's a good start. Respect goes both ways. If we look out for each other with kindness, not suspicion, the neighborhood will truly be safe." Their conversation ended there, but it carried weight. Some nearby neighbors had overheard, and later they whispered about how Karen had apologized. It wasn't said with mockery this time, it was said with relief. As the picnic continued, children played tag across the field, and music drifted from a small speaker. People shared food and stories. Karen sat quietly on her blanket, watching. She noticed how relaxed everyone seemed around Maria, how natural their smiles were. She realized something important: true respect was not earned by pointing out faults or enforcing small rules. It was earned by kindness, fairness, and trust. That night, as Karen walked home, the air felt cooler and lighter. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about which neighbor needed correcting. She was thinking about how she could change. At her front door, she paused and glanced across the street. Maria and Daniel were sitting together on their porch again, talking softly. Karen raised her hand in a small wave. Maria noticed and waved back with a gentle smile. Karen whispered to herself, "Maybe I can start fresh." It was not the end of her journey, but it was the beginning of something new. For Karen, respect was no longer just about rules. It was about people. And that was a lesson she would carry forward. The days after the picnic passed more quietly than Karen expected. She had thought people would continue whispering about her mistake, but something different began to happen. Neighbors no longer looked at her with suspicion. Instead, they seemed curious. They noticed that she was quieter now, less quick to point out faults, and perhaps even trying to change. One morning, Karen decided to do something unusual for herself. She baked a tray of cookies, placed them neatly in a basket, and walked across the street to Maria's house. Her dog trotted along beside her. For a moment, she hesitated at the front door, nervous about how her visit might be received. Then she rang the bell. Maria answered with her usual calm expression. When she saw Karen holding the basket, her smile grew warm. "Good morning, Karen. Come in." Karen stepped inside, feeling both shy and relieved. She placed the basket on the table. "I made these for you and Daniel. Just a small thank you for being patient with me." Maria glanced at the cookies and then at Karen. "That's kind of you." "Thank you. Would you like some tea?" Karen nodded, and the two women sat together at the kitchen table. The smell of cookies mixed with the fresh scent of brewed tea. For a few moments, silence filled the room. Karen fiddled with the edge of her napkin, then finally spoke. "You must think I'm a terrible person," she said softly. Maria shook her head. "No, I think you were someone who made a mistake. What matters is that you're here now, willing to make things right." Those words lifted a heavy weight from Karen's chest. She had expected scolding or coldness, but instead she received kindness. They spent the next half hour talking not about the incident, but about simple things. Gardening, recipes, and how quickly the seasons seemed to change. When Karen left, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. That afternoon, Karen looked around her own yard. She realized how often she had criticized others for small details while ignoring her own. Her fence needed painting, and her garden was filled with weeds. She pulled on her gloves, grabbed a small spade, and began working. Neighbors walking by noticed her effort. Some gave her encouraging smiles. One woman even stopped to chat, offering a bag of flower seeds. Little by little, Karen's role in the neighborhood began to shift. She was no longer seen as the self-appointed enforcer. Instead, people began to see her as someone who was learning, someone trying to be part of the community instead of controlling it. A week later, the Homeowners Association announced a neighborhood cleanup day. Families were invited to pick up litter, trim overgrown bushes, and freshen up shared spaces. Karen signed up immediately. On the day of the event, she arrived early with her dog by her side and a pair of gloves on her hands. To her surprise, Maria and Daniel were also there, smiling and ready to help. Maria gave Karen a small nod of greeting. Together, they joined a group clearing weeds along the park fence. At first, Karen worked quietly, unsure if others would want to talk to her. But soon, a teenager offered her a bottle of water, and an older couple shared jokes as they pulled weeds. Karen laughed for the first time in a long while, her laughter genuine and free. As the sun climbed higher, the group's efforts began to show. The park looked fresher, cleaner, more welcoming. When the work was done, neighbors gathered under the shade of a tree to share snacks and drinks. Karen sat among them, listening to their stories. She realized she had spent years watching these people but never truly knowing them. One neighbor turned to her and said, "It's nice to see you here, Karen. You're really helping out." Karen's eyes widened at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she replied softly. And she meant it. That evening, as she walked home, Karen thought about how different things felt now. She was no longer standing apart, criticizing. She was part of something, working side by side with her neighbors. The thought warmed her heart. Later, she sat on her porch, her dog curled at her feet. She watched children ride bicycles down the street, their laughter filling the air. Across the way, Maria and Daniel were on their porch too. When their eyes met, Karen gave a small wave. Maria returned it, her smile steady and kind. Karen whispered to herself, "This feels better." For the first time in years, she no longer felt like the guardian of the neighborhood. She felt like a neighbor, a real one. And though change was slow, Karen knew she was on a new path, one built on respect and kindness rather than suspicion. It was not the role she had once imagined for herself, but perhaps it was the role she had always needed. The neighborhood had settled into a comfortable rhythm again. Children played in the evenings, neighbors waved from their porches, and the streets carried the soft hum of peace. Karen, though still adjusting to her new role, felt lighter each day. She no longer stood guard with suspicion. Instead, she tried to join in where she could. One afternoon, however, an unexpected challenge arrived. A moving truck pulled into a small house near the edge of the street. The sound of its engine drew curious eyes, and soon people peeked from their windows to see who was moving in. Two young men stepped out of the truck. They wore simple jeans and shirts, their arms full of boxes. They looked friendly enough, though tired from the heavy work. Yet, almost instantly, whispers began to rise among the neighbors. "Who are they?" one woman asked her friend. "They don't look like they're from around here," another replied. "I hope they don't cause trouble," someone muttered. Karen heard the words as she walked her dog nearby. For a moment, her old habits stirred inside her. In the past, she would have been the first to assume something was wrong, the first to call attention to anything unusual. She paused, watching the young men carry furniture into the house. Her mind wavered between old suspicion and new understanding. Just then, Maria appeared, walking over with a calm stride. She carried a bottle of water in each hand. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said warmly, offering the bottles to the newcomers. The young men smiled gratefully, setting down their boxes to accept the gesture. Karen watched carefully. She could see how easily Maria bridged the gap. There was no suspicion in her eyes, only kindness. Other neighbors stood back, still whispering. Something inside Karen shifted. She remembered the sting of being judged unfairly, of having her neighbors whisper behind her back. She knew how it felt to be on the outside. She took a deep breath, then crossed the street toward the moving truck. "Hello," Karen said, her voice steady though her heart pounded. "I'm Karen. I live down the road. If you need an extra hand, I can help." The young men looked surprised but pleased. "Thank you," one of them said. "I'm Tom, and this is my brother, Leo. We're just moving in today." Karen nodded. "Welcome. You'll like it here." Her words carried sincerity, and Maria gave her a small approving smile. Together, the three of them carried a few boxes inside. Soon, the tension around the truck began to fade. Seeing Karen and Maria working alongside the new neighbors made others step forward as well. One man offered tools, another brought cold drinks, and before long the house was filled with friendly chatter. By evening, the moving was done. Tom and Leo sat on their porch with their new neighbors around them, sharing snacks and stories. Karen sat nearby, her dog curled beside her. She listened as the brothers talked about their jobs and their hopes for settling into the community. At one point, Tom turned to her and said, "Thank you for helping today. Honestly, when we pulled in, we thought no one wanted us here. But you made us feel welcome." Karen felt her throat tighten slightly. She remembered too clearly how she had once done the opposite to Maria. She managed a smile and replied, "Everyone deserves a good start. I'm glad you're here." Later that night, Karen sat on her porch, reflecting. The challenge had been clear. She could have fallen back into her old ways, letting suspicion guide her. But she had chosen differently. She had chosen kindness. Across the street, Maria stepped outside, waving softly. Karen waved back. For the first time, she felt not just forgiven but trusted. The next day, Whispers in the neighborhood were no longer about suspicion. Instead, people spoke about how welcoming the community had been to the new arrivals. Karen's name was included in those conversations, but this time with respect. "She's changed," one neighbor said quietly. "Yes," another agreed. "It seems like she's trying to do better." Karen overheard these words as she walked by, and instead of shame, she felt something new: pride, but the honest kind. Not pride in controlling others, but in growing, in being part of something good. That evening, Daniel stopped by with a bag of apples from his garden. He handed them to Karen and said kindly, "You did well yesterday. Maria told me you were one of the first to welcome the new neighbors." Karen smiled. "I only did what was right. I just wish I had understood sooner." Daniel shook his head. "Understanding late is still better than never. Change takes time, and you're doing it." As he left, Karen sat with the apples in her lap, her dog resting against her leg. She looked around the quiet street, feeling the hum of peace once more. This time, however, it was not the peace of strict rules or suspicion. It was the peace of belonging. For Karen, the test had come, and she had passed it. And in passing it, she felt truly part of the neighborhood for the first time. The days rolled into weeks, and the neighborhood grew more peaceful with each passing moment. The small incident that had once shaken the street was now a memory, replaced by stories of change and kindness. Children still played freely in the evenings, dogs barked cheerfully in the yards, and neighbors shared greetings that felt warmer than before. Karen had changed more than anyone expected. No longer did she march across lawns to correct tiny mistakes. No longer did she frown at curtains left open or cars parked slightly out of line. Instead, she smiled at her neighbors, asked about their families, and even offered help when needed. The new residents, Tom and Leo, quickly became part of the community. They often waved to Karen when she walked her dog, and sometimes they stopped to chat. Their presence reminded Karen of the moment when she had chosen kindness over judgment, and it gave her strength to keep moving forward. One Saturday morning, the Homeowners Association announced a special project. The old playground in the park had fallen into disrepair, and they wanted to rebuild it for the children. Volunteers were needed to clean, paint, and set up new equipment. When Karen heard the news, she didn't hesitate. She signed up immediately. On the day of the project, she arrived early, wearing work gloves and carrying a toolbox. The sight surprised many neighbors, who remembered the old Karen, the one who gave orders but never joined in the hard work. This time, she was different. She hammered nails, painted benches, and even cheered the children who ran around excitedly, waiting for their new playground to be finished. Sweat dripped down her forehead, but she didn't complain. She felt proud to be part of something meaningful. Maria and Daniel worked nearby, repairing the swings. At one point, Maria glanced toward Karen and gave a nod of approval. Karen returned the nod with a small smile, no words needed. By evening, the playground stood brighter and safer than before. Fresh paint gleamed under the sunset, the swings hung firmly from strong chains, and a new slide shone in the golden light. Children ran to test everything, their laughter filling the park. The neighbors gathered together, tired but happy. Someone brought lemonade, another brought sandwiches, and soon the group sat in a circle, sharing food and stories. Karen sat among them, her dog resting at her feet. She listened to the laughter around her and felt a warmth she had never known before. Then, one of the older neighbors stood up and raised his cup. "I want to say something," he began. "Today was not just about fixing the playground. It was about showing what kind of neighborhood we are. And I want to thank Karen, because she worked harder than anyone today." The words caught Karen by surprise. Her cheeks warmed, and she looked down at her hands. But the neighbors clapped, their smiles genuine. Maria spoke next, her voice calm but carrying weight. "Yes, thank you, Karen. You've shown us that people can change, and that kindness builds stronger communities than judgment ever could. Karen lifted her head slowly. Her eyes met Maria's, and for the first time, she felt not only forgiven but respected. She realized she no longer carried the heavy title of the watcher or the enforcer. She carried something better, the trust of her neighbors. Later that night, as the crowd dispersed, Karen walked home under the glow of the streetlights. Her dog trotted beside her, tail wagging happily. She paused at her gate and looked back at the park. The playground stood proudly, a symbol of what the community could achieve together. Across the street, Maria and Daniel were returning home too. Maria raised her hand in a friendly wave, and Karen returned it. There was no distance between them now, no wall of suspicion. There was only respect. Inside her house, Karen sat by the window with a cup of tea. For years, she had believed her role was to control, to guard, to point out flaws. But now she understood something deeper. True belonging wasn't about rules. It was about kindness, fairness, and trust. She thought back to the day she had made the call to 911, convinced she was protecting the neighborhood. That day had been her lowest, but also the beginning of her change. Without it, she might never have learned what it truly meant to be part of a community. Her dog rested its head on her knee, and she smiled softly. "We're part of it now," she whispered. "And it feels right." The neighborhood outside lay quiet under the stars, peaceful and alive with new friendships. For the first time, Karen no longer felt like the outsider who watched from the window. She felt like a neighbor, a true one, trusted and respected. And as she finished her tea, she knew that this time, she would never let that sense of belonging go.